Pinky, Pinky! Minx! You don't feel like doing me tonight? Yeah. I might have like one line down there and two coming from the back to the side.
You mean like a
V.
Special cleansers remove sticky marks with less smearing.
Haute couture.
Anti-static agents pick up more dust. That's it. No problem.
The original documentary on Alexander McQueen.
And some polishes can smear.
The McQueen tapes.
I didn't care about what people thought of me. I didn't care what I thought of myself. So I would go into the foliage of my dark side and pull these horrors out of my soul and put them on the catwalk.
You know, there's lots of people in the industry who say, oh, I discovered Alexander McQueen. But you don't discover talent. Talent's there. You open doors for talent, you push it through, or you help it along. No one discovered Alexander McQueen. Alexander McQueen discovered himself. Lee had this very strange CV.
I wasn't very good at school. I was always drawing clothes in every lesson, in science, in biology, and but I used to enjoy art most.
When he left school, he wasn't sure what he wanted to do. He was out of work, looking for work, I should say, because my husband's very strict on the children going out to work. We was watching a television programme one evening, and they were saying that they couldn't get apprentices to work in Savile Row. So I just said to him, why don't you go and try? So you just knock on the door. They can only either say yes or no, you know. And that's exactly what he done.
Anson Shepherd started in 1906. We like to do things slightly different to other people. We have our house style, and that's what we're going to teach the apprentices to make.
I was taught by a master tailor from County Court in Ireland.
He was the best tailor that we had working on the premises.
The first year you start off padding collars, putting in pockets, but you're expected to make a full jacket ready for fitting by the end of the first year. As soon as you put it on, it should just fit like a glove, and you know it's made for you.
I knew I couldn't survive in a place like that for the rest of my life, cluttered in a small workshop, sitting on a bench, padding lapels. But I did have a passion, and I was good at it. I was good at tailoring a jacket. I was quick at learning, and quick at learning trousers. I wanted to learn everything, everything. Give me everything.
It was beginning of the 90s when I had a bespoke tailoring shop in Mount Street, and he just walked in one day. He looked like skinhead, but just told me he can cut frock coat much better than 50 years old tailor I had. So I was very curious and just told him, okay, like, show me what you can do. I never really made clothes in a traditional way. I was experimenting myself on how to create structure and volumes. I began to just take in material, any material, and by putting them all together, somehow you can start to create a three-dimensional form. Lee wanted to understand why I'm doing this way or that way.
When Lee was 17, he said, I'll make you a couple of skirts. And I've got to say, they fitted like a glove. They were so fitted to my body. I couldn't even move my legs hardly. But I used to get compliments on this skirt. I did used to wonder, oh, I hope he sort of finds the right thing for himself in life.
He was a sweet boy from the East End, looking to make money. We needed technical help. Machinists, we needed pattern cutters, we needed people who had hands-on experience in making clothes. Gave me no attitude, was never late, always knew what he was doing, always delivered. He listened continually to Sinead O'Connor, which was quite odd because no one else liked Sinead O'Connor at the time. You know, he really liked her for some reason. I always remember him with his Walkman on, listening to Sinead O'Connor.
2, 1, ignition, lift off.
Red or Dead was this very young streetwear company. When I said to him that the Space Baby collection was based on the anniversary of the men landing on the moon, he was like, what? He didn't know that you could take a subject that, had no relation to clothing and actually get inspiration from that to design clothing. So he didn't understand this idea of visual research or historic references or sexual references.
We copy you on the ground. The Eagle has landed.
He must have asked me questions. What can I do next? How can I push myself forward? And at the time, all the designers in Italy were opening diffusion lines. He went to Italy with no language, no place to stay, no money, no qualifications. I thought within a week he'll be back, with his tail between his legs. A week later, maybe 10 days, I get a call from Lee from Italy. He'd landed a job as an assistant for Romeo Gigli. To say I was shocked was an understatement.
They say to me, okay, I'm looking for a new jacket. I have in my mind this shape, but my tailor, they cannot reach that shape. Maybe you can help me to do it. And we start to do that jacket, and we did the first fitting. I say, no, it's wrong. That is not what I'm looking for. So we did the tailor with Lee, they did one more. We did the second fitting, and again, I take out the lining, looking inside the jacket, and this was wrong. Third fitting, I say, no, it's incorrect. And I take out the lining, and inside the jacket, Lee wrote with the black panel, fuck you, Romeo. That was the time when I was looking for new shapes, for shapes. And he was looking so deeply and hard. He was really deeply looking to understand every time. He was leaving my studio because he wanted to study more and more and more.
You can't teach talent, but what you can do is make them better at what they do or more professional. And to me, the whole thinking behind this MA was to make them work in teams, working together, as you do in the fashion world. I saw this unprepossessing, I must say, very shabby, very unattractive, I hate to say this, but it was true, boy with a bundle of clothes over his arm outside my office. I said to him, who are you looking for? And he said, I've come to see you. But I had no job, which he said he was after. The whole thing intrigued me. He was passionate. And to me, this is the secret, really. If you tap into that. I found myself saying, well, I think you should come on my course. And I couldn't offer him money. That was really sad. And it was patently obvious he had none.
Aunt Renee said she had money in the bank, sitting there not doing anything, and she would rather help Lee. She'd worked in the rag trade. She knew that Lee had talent.
And he came back and said, my aunt is going to pay the fees, and I'm coming.
St Martin's was the place to go. But what I liked about it was the freedom of expression and being surrounded by like-minded people.
I think we got on really well because we had the same sense of humour, and he laughed all the time, so he was just funny and disrespectful, and he'd do catwalk shows down the corridor. He'd just muck around. Whenever he could muck around, he'd muck around.
I was actually teaching there at the time as well, and he was not frightened to tell people, I know better than you, even the tutors. He was a bit of a nightmare student because he knew so much.
I'm sure he was a pain and did interrupt people. He didn't actually dare interrupt me. But he used it. He used it as I intended him to use it. And he'd come to a painting or a book, and not having had a formal education, it was all new to him. And that was it. He reinterpreted things in his way. It wasn't filtered through, as with a lot of us who had more conventional backgrounds. I loved that.
He knew where to go for everything, London was his town. Where do I get my buttonholes? He'd go, you want to go to Martin in Soho. If you want fabric, then you want to go to Berwick Street, Shepherd's Bush. he would take me to gay bars and he would take me to lesbian bars and he'd like sit me there and he'd go, you know, this is what you want, this is what you want. I go, no, I really just want to go home. Can I just go home and do my homework?
The course always ended with the degree show. No other college had ever been invited, as I was, to show during British Fashion Week.
He called me when he was nearly finishing the final collection and asked me to come in to have a look at it and talk to him about it. It had all the elements. It had the history of the East End. It had the darkness, Jack the Ripper stalks his victims. It had the research. It had a really great story behind it.
He was reading books like Perfume, which is all about the murder of women, and he had a very dark side to him as well. So he was drawing from all of these influences and then creating something very beautiful out of it.
The pieces went past me and they moved in a way I've never seen. And I wanted them. They were modern, they were classical. He would do a black coat, and then he'd line it with human hair, and it was blood red inside, so it was like a body. It was like the flesh with blood. And I just thought, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. It was about sabotage and tradition, which is the perfect combination, and beauty, violence, all the things that I suppose the 90s represent.
How difficult is it to discover genius?
Not at all difficult, because they have it and I spot it.
So if you're interested in the history of late 20th century clothes, Isabella Blow is a big player.
I was at American Vogue and Anna Wintour sort of discovered me and I worked for her. And then I went to British Vogue.
McQueen was her night and she was going to take him to the top. She was determined.
I just knew. I rang up his mother and said, you've produced a genius. And I think, you know, he's like the Saint Laurent of the year 2000. And his mother said to him, look, there's this mad woman who keeps trying to call us. I don't know, she wants some of your clothes. I rang between 6 and 8 times a day. Finally, I got a little voice on the end of the line. Hello? So I said, yes, can I come make an appointment with you? My name's Isabella Blow. I don't know to this day if he knew who I was.
No, I just wanted the money. I was desperate for money.
I wasn't interested in him either. I just wanted the clothes.
I didn't give her no money off. I said, that's $350, love. You can take it or leave it. And she loved that.
It wasn't until I went to the Bluebird Garage collection that he did that I just thought, what have I unleashed? And he walked across, said, I owe it all to you, which I thought was very, very sweet, because it was far from true. He'd worked every inch of the way himself.
Every fashion designer wants to create an illusion, create things that disturb, fascinate people. Clothes are really beautiful to work with, but there's also a reality outside. Some people don't want to hear it. It's all lovey-dovey and everything's fine in the world all the time. And I tell it the way it is.
In the 90s, you used to make clothes to go out, and you used to make something just for that night. You know, you're going to this nightclub, this person is on, or that DJ. Right, what are we going to do? I think Lee took everything. I mean, that's one of Lee's strengths, that he took a lot of Bowery's aesthetic. It's transgressive, it's in your face, and thought, how does this translate onto a runway? Lee also used that language of fetish in terms of rubber and latex and leather, and put it into his fashion design. We started going out with each other, but part of me was thinking, but also it's quite useful because I can sew as well. It was literally anyone that could sew, and it didn't matter whether they were any good particularly at sewing or not. Were they willing to come and sit in the studio for like 16 hours a day, and were they going to be good fun to be around? Lee, that was the badly behaved, naughty schoolboy that was always doing pranks on people in the pub, and that's the person that I liked. and loved.
No, put your hands in it!
I've always wanted to do that.
At the time I first met Lee, I was living in Hoxton Square, and one day in pops this guy, and I kind of figured he had rented the downstairs. Come in for a cup of tea, come in for a cup of tea. And he asked what I did. I said, oh, I do grooming for men, hair and makeup. And he goes, oh, I'm having a show soon. Would you do the hair and makeup for the guys? And I was like, don't you need to see some of my work first? I'd never done a show before, so... And he's like, no, I can tell.
He said to me one day, I've decided to do my own collection. I remember thinking, how on earth does he think he's going to have a business and make a collection? He has got nothing. He's got no money, no wherewithal, no studio, nobody to support him, nothing behind him. And yet, he was determined this is what he was going to do.
I survived on unemployment benefit, and I bought all my fabrics. I bought all my fabrics with my dole money, and I went round to my parents for baked beans and tins of soup and things like that. This is my pooch.
He said to me, I really need to get a logo. We asked my boyfriend at the time if he would design it. It was my idea to put the C inside the Q, but then Dave designed the rest of it. He was fantastic at getting people to do a phenomenal amount of work for him, and we were never, ever paid. In fact, we were paying him to work for him. Oh, how amazing is that?
Just to be part of it, be part of his vision. Yeah, he had that, even from the very beginning, that pull.
Yeah.
Isabella was very keen to call him Alexander just because she thought it sounded better as a designer. It sounded grander and more romantic.
Izzy got criticised for trying to make him posh. So what? Good for Izzy. She was trying to make him successful. And she did. And Alexander McQueen is the brand, huh?
Why do you love her so much, Lee?
Because she's the same as me. She doesn't care. She doesn't care what people think. At the end of the day, we're separate entities to everyone else, and we have our own personal view about things.
It's when you fall in love with somebody and then you love it and you nurture it and you look after it like it's your garden. People garden, they cook, they do the same thing. My ingredients are clothes.
She introduced him to everyone. She championed him. So I suppose what initially started as a work relationship for her became a creative friendship.
She was someone that was always really excited and wanted to see the next thing and the new thing and wanted to push people. It was never about money, as in I never saw any money going backwards and forwards between either of them.
I just remember the laughter, the exciting creativity of the mid-90s and the adventure they were on as a rocket. They shot to the moon.
Sure, you're a hungry little thing.
The early days, the very happy days, and just, it was short times, but they were beautiful and they were funny. And Izzy didn't have children, so she threw her maternal love to her protege. I look forward to seeing Alexander because he made me laugh so much. Izzy and McQueen had a very dirty sense of humour. McQueen described Izzy as a cross between Lucrezia Borgia and a Billingsgate fishwife. Izzy had a very vulgar humour. I always found the cocks and the cunts slightly... I was a bit, I wasn't really into their earthy humour, but however rude McQueen got, Izzy was even worse. So they loved to play off each other like that and be outrageous.
I know Alexander loves birds, so I've got this bird hat on designed by Philip because we're going to go out to do some falconry tomorrow because Alexander's got a very, he's passionate about birds. We're going to go and fly some falcons tomorrow afternoon.
We did go and stay at Hills a few times. You'd end up diving into Izzy's dressing up box and we'd all be wearing sort of fantastical costumes for dinner and things like that. The world she inhabited was so far removed from the world that any of us had come from. There was a sort of unreality to it. Whenever we went to that house, you felt so at home. And I think Lee felt very at home there.
They had this big sister, fun person, to be with. It was outrageous. With Izzy, be as different as you can and keep going. The more different, the more I love it.
I really don't like the norm. I don't think it's, you know, you don't move forward. Seriously, you just don't move forward if you play safe.
You really do piss a lot of people off.
His first shows were unbelievable. I mean, people were winded by them. People walked out. Quite a few acerbic reviews. But everything else before paled into comparison.
I don't want to do a show that you walk out feeling like you've just had Sunday lunch. I want you to come out either feeling repulsed or exhilarated, as long as it's an emotion. If you leave without emotion, then I'm not doing my job properly. So that's that.
And that's the thing about Alexander's. I think his clothes are very emotional. This coat is like based on a tramp, so it's based on someone who hasn't got any money, standing in the street, nowhere to sleep. You wrap it around yourself, you feel fantastic. Then you have all this passion and love and slashing and sex and romance.
The idea of the collections were never to produce. The shows were all about publicity and creating a marketing ploy for Alexander McQueen, the designer.
The clothes were impossible to reproduce because they were made out of plastic bags or masking tape. They were show clothes.
Leeds started doing bumpsters. These were cut so low that you could see the model's pubic hair.
It's nothing to do with pubic hair. It's just a technical thing where, as a tailor, you're breaking up the proportion of the body by lowering the trousers, elongating the torso. It's nothing to do with bum cleavage, but that's an added bonus if you've got a nice bum. So.
He told Dan Miller, go and put your pubic hairs in Anna Wintour's face. It's just funny, naughty behaviour.
You could give Alexander £500 and he could produce 30 pieces of clothing.
He saw some clingful on the floor and he said, oh, I'm just going to make a dress out of that. I'm going to put the model and wrap her up. And he just cut this dress, put a zip in it, and suddenly that went down the runway.
Getting a tire and running it over the suit. Just things like that, just genius.
£4 worth of lace, invisible zip, £1. Sprayed with car spray paint. Probably cost less than £10, those dresses, to make. But through that weird alchemy of being cut and made by Lee, suddenly they're being requested.
Avedon wanted to have this dress for Sharon Stone.
So it has to be in America now. Needs someone to fly over with the dress on Concorde. That still upsets me to this day. I didn't get to go on Concorde.
It was me.
That's almost the period where I think the madness really kicked in.
The show was brilliant, but I wake up tomorrow morning and think, I've got to get a bottle of milk. Where am I going to get 42p for?
So we went to a McDonald's. We got 2 cheeseburgers, 2 fries, 2 Cokes. And I was that tired that I just dropped the tray. And then we were having to pick the food up off the floor. And I thought, this is a weird world that you've just shown the finale of London Fashion Week, but we haven't got £5 to eat.
That's how it is. People got to understand that. You know, you do fucking fab shows, but you've got to start living.
The closure, you know, BBC One, at the time 12 million viewers. You're 22 years old. You're not in any of the shots being interviewed. And you're dictating the terms on how you're going to appear.
Because I was doing the shows on money that I got from unemployment benefit, I couldn't afford to show my face on camera because I would be arrested for working as well as signing on. Well, did it piss you off? No. Well, it should have done. That was the idea. I really worked at East End Yob, this juxtaposition between an hooligan and someone who uses a needle, and people couldn't fathom it. And so it was new, it was a breath of fresh air.
Savile Row, Cockney Geezer, Ding Dong, all of that. He was aware how seductive that was.
I get a bit annoyed when I read that. He was far from a bad boy. In fact, he was a very loving, happy child and very generous.
Beautiful face, huh?
I just remember this one time when I went round to his house. I think I'd said something was shit or something in front of his mum, and he just turned around, glared at me and said, "Don't you fucking swear in front of my fucking mother."
We were never what people call poor. My husband was a London taxi driver, so even though there were 6 children, they all had everything that they should have had.
I don't know, it just seems like an honest place around here. You know where you stand, if you know what I mean. If someone's going to mug you, They tell you before they do it. I'm only joking.
From my granddad, he got the sense of humour, which was at times wicked.
I'll crack it, son, I'll crack it.
I think that he struggled coming out of that background and going into the world.
Well, that was the choice I made to come out to my father. I mean, I told all my brothers and sisters and aunts, but my father was a London taxi driver. He would come home at night and say, God, I nearly ran over a bloody queer last night in Sorrow. And I'd have to deal with this.
My dad could be a bit cutting sometimes, but he was joking. And if you didn't know him, you'd probably take that the wrong way.
Lee's father saying, sell your clothes in Brick Lane, and never quite understanding what Lee was doing.
My dad wanted me to be some sort of mechanic or something, but it never worked out that way.
From my nan, he got that storytelling, that dark romance of the Victorian times. I think that really lent itself to his visions of the stories that he wanted to tell.
That's all he does. Mira, that's all he does.
Lee, not me.
It's not that so much. He makes it smell.
Oh, Mother, come here.
And then, if you don't smell that, you're smelling this. You broke the
camera.
Yeah, no.
She was very strong and powerful, and quite a lot was unsaid. But my God, you realise there was a really strong bond between them.
She made him feel like he could do anything.
I always encourage them to read and have lots of books, because I myself love history and things like that. That's one about the Highland clan.
She was looking to the genealogy of the McQueen family and aimed at proving that the McQueens came from the Queens of the Isle of Skye.
It opened up his world. You know, he was born in Stratford, but he knew there was this other life for him which come from Scotland.
She encouraged the sort of fantasy and excitement of those stories, and Lee went with it.
You have two types of Scotland people associate themselves with. The Vivienne Westwood romantic Scotland sways the tartan silk. My ancestry is the Jacobites of Scotland. The war of the English and the Scottish, where the English raped loads of women, killed clans completely off, and it's like a form of genocide. It was then, and people don't realise this. I mean, take Bosnia. How many dead people have you seen? There's millions of dead people in Bosnia. It's just genocide in the end, and people have got to realise it still goes on in the world today.
Something different about him. He had this artistic energy in him rather than like a fashion designer. I rang his mother and said, I want to work for your son. She gave me the address and I went one morning. And ever since, we were working every day on the Highland Rape collection, trying to get the pieces ready.
There were times when he hadn't yet started working on the collection and it was due soon, and he would do one drawing after another, after another, after another, after another, and there was a collection in one evening. Very quick, very fluid.
He was also very creative at night. His adrenaline was much more alive, and we usually used to put music.
He would listen to the piano, and it became very important. The composer, Michael Nyman, became part of his team.
I was just enjoying myself to watch him because he was sitting like an old lady, his needle and his thimble. You can feel like it's kind of a therapeutic work for him.
He went into a sort of zone, and in fact I always used to say his eyes went black because he suddenly was focusing on what he was doing and he almost couldn't hear anybody else.
He could draft a jacket freehand just with a piece of chalk, so he wasn't using measurements. He could just, from his eye, read someone's body measurements and then be able to draw that out onto a bit of cloth. At heart, Lee was a romantic, and that romantic is because of that physical relationship to what you produce, which then comes back to that idea of craft in a way.
The family would always get invites to the shows. It was very important that my nan was there. He really wanted to make my nan proud.
Aunt Renee and Mum made sure that the models had some sandwiches. Mum would have probably done her sausage rolls.
We were all really, as a group of young, really cool English models, so excited to see this man that had this reputation.
I was just amazed at all these people, photographers, and I thought, my God, they're all here to see Lee. I hope they're not disappointed, because I thought, this is just Lee from Stratford.
The darkness, the going to the depths and the recesses of one's mind to come up with such things like Highland rape. I'm going to send down loads of girls like they've looked like they've just been raped. And then we were all looking like we'd come out of a hedge backwards, and I was going, is this the hair and makeup?
They're not easy garments to look at. They do look like something from a crime scene.
I honestly just thought that he really just didn't like women, he didn't like the models, he didn't like anything, he was just trying to torture us all. But his vision, when you actually came down and the silhouette and the way he made you look was so extraordinary. I don't think I really understood, because I was 15 at the time, exactly what was going on or the connotations of it. It wasn't until probably the next day that I read the newspapers, and, you know, there was quite a backlash of the statement of the show. I mean, it was pretty intense. But he made every single headline, and that's what he wanted to do. And he sure got it.
Judith Church, MP for Dagenham, thought there was no excuse for such a show.
The very title of the show, Highland Rape, has been done to shock people. It's been done to attract publicity. It has succeeded, and that, in a way, is sad, because I think women want to look at fashion, but they don't want to see it in some way as portraying them as a victim.
I'm not a misogynist, but the idea was saying to the public, a man takes from a woman, the woman's not giving it, and that's what rape is. My oldest sister was badly beaten up by her husband, and when you're 8 years old and you're seeing your sister strangled by her husband, who's now dead, thank God, you know, all you want to do is make women look stronger.
You might not like the honesty he was presenting you with. You might find it distasteful, shocking, or aggressive, or misogynistic, but for him it was his truth. Those garments all tell you about Lee. They're almost like confessional. They do relate to things that happened in his childhood. We were just in our flat. It was literally just in the middle of the evening. He said, oh, by the way, I was abused when I was a child by my brother-in-law. It just came out, and he started crying, and we started talking, and then almost as soon as he'd started telling me all of that, he said, oh, anyway, I don't want to talk about that anymore.
The stuff that he saw, I mean, the violence against my mum, the abuse he suffered by my dad, and the abuse my mum suffered by her dad, they had that affinity together, you know, they shared that, Lee and my mum. They were both affected by the same person, and they had that connection through that, you know. And Lee saw my mum very much like a mother figure, and somebody that he wanted to protect, but my mum wanted to protect him as well.
I had quite a big burden on my shoulders. But I'd always felt close to Lee, and in the early years, Lee had seen things like domestic violence, and at the time it must have also had an effect on his mind.
And that stuff he had to get at, I think it was a way of exercising his demons, a way of protecting women and himself by creating these strong women who looked like they had armour on. There's armour for his heart as well, you know, so.
The relationship between me and Lee, I joked that it was 4 seasons long, purely because I think those collections and those shows became markers in terms of how our work life was also tied up with our relationship. And looking back on it now, I can see the reasons why it would be, you know, how could a relationship work with all the things that were going on in his life, all the things in his past, I can't think of any relationship that would be able to deal with that.
I have to question the motives in why I'm in this business. I think that's why I have to really make it a success. I'm doing what has to be done. You don't do this for the fame and the glamour of it all.
When you went to St Martin's in the first year, you go to Paris, and the idea is that you're meant to go to exhibitions. But we just spent all of our time wangling our way into various shows. So we went to this show, and it was all very floral, and there was chiffon, and Lee was going, well, that's rubbish, oh my God, you know, this is just the worst show ever, and bloody hell, Givenchy, you know, that's a load of crap, that's for, like, old ladies. I never, ever want to work somewhere like that.
La haute couture française à l'heure britannique. Après le départ de John Galliano pour Christian Dior, c'est un Écossais, Alexander McQueen, qui a pris en main la collection Givenchy et ses modèles de l'été 97.
It was a really exciting time to be covering the industry because it was changing, it was evolving. People like Bernard Arnault were buying up small family brands and then turning them into global corporations. And first he brought in John Galliano, and after 2 years, moved John over to Dior, and then needed another new young hot flavor for Givenchy.
And so he said, why did he want you?
He said when I was hired that I was his horse.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's in looks or what, but he said I was his horse he betted on.
I was living with Lee when Givenchy called, and he thought that they wanted him to design a handbag. And I'm like, wow, cool, man, you know? Next thing I know, he comes in and he basically says that they've asked him to be creative director of Givenchy. And I was like, you are kidding me.
He called me at work, and then he said, they've offered me this job. Now, if I move to Paris, will you come with me? And I was like, yeah, of course. It was exciting and also quite scary as well, because it was still that honeymoon period of our relationship.
Why did you go to Givenchy, having already created your own name, having won British Design of the Year twice in a row?
For one reason, the money was good. But then what I do with the money from Givenchy, I put it straight back into McQueen, and it helps me employ people from McQueen to build my own company up.
Very talented people that he brought with him to Givenchy. What a team, man.
He told me I will need a team to work with me, so I was thinking of you. So think about it and let me know. There's nothing to think about it. Of course I take the job. We took an aeroplane from City Airport. We were the weirdest people in the plane. We was all like businessmen, and we were there with our bleached jeans, with a lot of attitude.
Where did you find this in Japan?
I got it in Tom Road.
Really?
Well, I thought it
There was huge excitement because imagine, you know, when you're that age and you're being given that amount of, this one, responsibility and also that amount of money.
Statue.
The Sebastian Pons.
Hello, Sebastian. Sweaty armpits. Oh, God, you got wet patches.
I think in the McQueen studio, I was a little bit like the Buffon, because I was the funny one there. They were taking the piss of my accent. Spanish Buffon in a British court.
Oh, it is.
Simon Costin.
Oh, God, you're looking kind of gross today, Simona.
I saw myself as a person that put things into context. The set was always there to reflect the sort of untold story of the collection. There was Katie, of course, Katie England.
Katie's the most important part of McQueen. Camera up, please. She's the Tweedledee to my Tweedledum. She fuels my imagination.
I help research the collection. I bring his things to his attention that I think might be important in fashion. I'm always there at the right-hand side.
Sean Lean was very much involved in the business making jewellery.
What do you think, eh? Fancy a dance? For me to do work like this is very good for me. It allows me to go from one extreme to the other. And now I'm going into different areas. I'm working with body jewellery, and it's really going into a form of sculpture, really.
Sarah Burton. Sarah was the intern.
He looked at us like the sort of pillars that will make him feel secure.
We had this really nice flat.
I love the area. I'm in Place des Vosges. I mean, hello.
Oh God, that's really scary.
Thinking about it now, it was tiny. When I would come over to start working on the set, I'd be on the sofa.
Sebastian!
I always ended up sleeping in Lee's room because Lee was always collapsing on the sofa.
Lee! You changed the pillow? Yeah, fucking right.
We had a driver, so we got driven everywhere.
Oh, wait a minute, you go blurred, did you? That's better. Say hello to the people in England.
Such fun.
Could do some funny tricks. So, oh, I'm on speed, baby.
When we arrived at Givenchy, everybody was kind of like bending the head to him and calling him Monsieur McQueen, which was like, they're calling you Monsieur McQueen here?
Cuff.
When we arrived, I think they were in shock. The way we dress, the way we work, and the jokes we made.
Obviously, it's very grand, the chandeliers, and so it was very different from the working environment in London, which was a kind of very, very small room with chaotic stuff everywhere.
Here I have my own office. I pick up the phone and I get what I want. Because I want it. So I asked for it.
It was just like really bunch of young kids running about in the Givenchy.
Were they surprised that you were chosen?
I think they put most people in a coma when
Out of a sudden, we're there sitting in Uber's Givenchy house, looking out the window, and you see the Balenciaga sign, and you knew that Yves Saint Laurent was there, and knowing that John Galliano was at Avenue Montaigne, just a few yards from there. And there we are with Alexander McQueen being the new talk of the town, and I felt special.
He was trying to find his feet there, obviously had to make a huge impression because it was his first collection.
And I remember telling Lee, everybody's looking at us and we have nothing. And he always would answer, don't worry, Sebastian, we'll get it done.
We don't come up with the ideas until the very last moment. I don't know, it just comes to me. It must be come from God or something. I don't know, it's just like I'm constantly looking through a sign. This is Paris and Paris chic. This is Givenchy, this is not McQueen. This is where elegant suits are made and fantastic fabrics are used. I mean, it's going to take my own label, McQueen, another 40 years to get the reputation this one has.
I remember once we saw this beautiful work. Lee asked Catherine Delon, who was the charge of the atelier, who's done this fabulous work, and she's not allowed to come in. It's like, what do you mean she's not allowed to come in? Please let her in. I remember from that day on, Lee wanted to see the person who has worked directly with the garment. And I think they loved that.
This is the Bet Lynch dress. And we also treated it, bonding plastic over the top for raincoats. So you get the whole ensemble.
None of us spoke French, and the French atelier didn't speak English. Lee would actually kind of like draw in the air how we would have to be.
Mais il y a des jupes là.
Yeah. Yeah, it's okay.
Il y a jupe et jupe.
Oh.
Des petites jupes.
Oh, it's okay.
I think.
I thought it was pantalon.
J'ai très peur quand il prend les ciseaux. Ça c'est... Quand je le vois avec les ciseaux, parce qu'il m'a déjà coupé des choses. Il m'a déjà coupé un pantalon, une combinaison pantalon. Il me l'a coupé en body. Alors maintenant, quand je le vois avec les ciseaux, j'ai très très peur.
They're quite precise and like like take the threads out and this, and I just get the scissors and go whack it off, and they go like that, and I go, it's okay, it's only clothes.
I'll never forget the expression on her face, but in the end she saw exactly what he was doing. She was in awe. A very mutual, respect grew between the two of them.
Haute couture is about the atelier. I come from Savile Row, so I have great respect for the tailors. They deserve just as much praise as I do.
Lee, one day he said, where can we go and eat? Where do the workers eat? And then Catherine said, no, there is a canteen on the basement for the workers. And Lee was like, so let's go there. When we went down there, the people flipping out, like Alexander is eating with us. They couldn't believe it. These fashion houses, they treat the designer like he's a king. And they treated Lee like a king. But Lee didn't want to behave like a king. Lee wanted to behave like a regular person.
The ideas for the show, they grew out of the collection. As the collection developed, he would pull threads and stories out of that. And there was always mood boards and things pinned all over the walls. Everyone fed in. It was a very group practice. But Lee was the spider in the centre of the web, as it were, pulling everything together and distilling what it was that he had in his head.
I remember the fraughtness about a week before the show when things coming down and not right and things having to be changed. It was really insanely crazy. The pressure was super intense.
It's so different. You can't suddenly just keep hiring and different styles and stuff. And we just introduced all the diamonds into that section.
In 25 days, to put a 55 outfit collection together is not an easy task.
The first couture show had the theme of the Golden Fleece, the sort of Jason the Argonauts.
They wanted it to be amazing.
My first feeling from Alex's description was there had to be warriors mixed with goddess. I said, oh, we do horns. He said, yeah, but too big. I said, but how big? He said, well, Genghis Khan is the junior size. Give me the senior.
It's the 19th of January 1997, and as they say in the trade, we're about to witness a fashion moment. At the tender age of 27, British Designer of the Year Alexander McQueen is about to show his first haute couture collection.
Every model had to have a character, an identity, a signature. Every single girl could have been a show on her own.
Where the inspiration come from, he told me, from the logo. The logo is the G's, which it looks like Greek motif, and the Givenchy label is white and gold.
And always with Lee's collections, there were some pieces where you go, it's rather risque. I think a lot of the press focused on the ones that were a little bit more crazy or a little bit, unwearable.
French designers were complaining and saying, oh, they're not even French and they're taking over Givenchy. Look what he's doing to Givenchy. I think it was them saying, I'm still going to be who I am. Regardless that you put me in this posh space, I'm still who I am. I like that they stayed true to who they were. They actually brought England into Paris in their own unique way.
People were talking. Fashion editors, he's a big mouse, or he has a big head, or the British, what does he think? And then I understood that basically the world was against him.
And you go to do your first show. It's not a huge success. No?
No, that's true. Well done.
They were wishing to see him crash and be destroyed.
They have claws and they have knives and they're throwing everything into your back, which is fine because I'm a good fighter. But
I remember us afterwards, Lee was, hellish, yeah. That was a really hard night. It was a difficult night after that. Just a few punches and arguments.
I think he's already done a lot with the house because Givenchy have had a lot of press. It's a more difficult thing to deal with because McQueen is McQueen in London. Givenchy is taking over from another man in Paris. As Alexander says himself, it's like taking a dinosaur out of the sea. And I think in one season, he's done that. So I think in a year, he will have done 20 times that.
The Givenchy changed everything. The fun times were over. I had an accountant who spoke French, and they were going to Paris to sign the deal. And I said, please make sure Izzy gets something out of it. And then my accountant did ask McQueen, and McQueen said, Izzy and I are not about money. When the money did come, and Alexander cut her out, that was very tough. The friendship changed. She was so hurt with rejection. She should have created a buzz. She'd had a salon at Givenchy. She'd have made it the most happening place in Paris.
I do remember going to Hills straight after the takeover at Givenchy. Like, you cannot imagine the tension between the two of them in this room.
These designers think that you made me. And you
No, they
it's never been about...
No, they don't. They know that
What do they do? Because you see it all the time in the press. You see them like, oh, Isabella Blow responsible for Philip Treacy and Alexander McQueen?
No, they say...
They do just say that. But the thing is, it's never been about that for me and you.
Does that really annoy you that they always put this sort of strap as discovered by Isabella Blow? Does it really piss you off?
No, not at all, because Izzy has helped me a lot in that way, but not in a way that she's sort of like, you know, she does it because she loves my clothes, not because she loves me.
Exactly. That's the point.
Oh.
Because I can't stand her guts. I'm joking.
I do remember sitting there thinking to myself, please lay off Izzy, because she's done nothing but help you, but you seem to be giving her a really difficult time.
Izzy Kingmaker and is the man she championed, and then he resented that and wanted to be his own man, so there was no position for Isabella Blow at Givenchy. Punishment. And I remember McQueen turned to me and said, I'm the tycoon now, Detmar. And it wasn't meant affectionately. We had a policy, don't show hurt, don't show weakness. Keep your head up, keep proud, keep fighting. Something will turn up. It's got to.
His star ascended, and hers didn't as much. And, you know, he slightly abandoned her.
And then Izzy suddenly got this job at the Sunday Times, and McQueen said, you've been resurrected, Izzy. And yeah, I thought, oh, no thanks to you, mate.
I saw myself within the press and in the public eye as the gazelle, and the gazelle always got eaten. And that's how I see human life. We can all be discarded quite easily. The fragility of designers' time in the press. You're there, you're gone. It's a jungle out there.
I went to his London studio and he was talking about the haute couture show. I tried to please them and then I fucked it up. So I'm gonna do my own thing. It's gonna be very McQueen, the next one.
Fuck you. Fuck you, all of you. I'm gonna show you.
We went from this sort of the hallowed halls of Givenchy into the sort of rough, gritty borough market. People just sweeping all the rotting fruit and veg.
No, it's nice to show them the rough part of London, make them a bit scared, look over their shoulder once in a while.
It's nothing to do with couture. Now you forgot Givenchy. We're in another chapter, in another world, in another McQueen.
The London shows were always, the audience, the expectation was so great. The shows in Paris were far more formal and reserved. People would scream their heads off in London.
It was crazy, people literally fighting to see the catwalk.
Lee just running from model to model and screaming and shouting at everyone.
We want to start the show, just get back out there.
And just always moving, always stressing and dressing, actually, together. One of the models was late. He said, fuck her, and he started the show.
He used to go, right, Jodes, just go for it. He used to psych me up, and I used to literally get out into the catwalk and go, rah!
It was really the first time that the collection kind of seeped out into everything, from the energy that was in that space to the effect it had on people. Sort of angst and anger and fear that was woven through that show.
We were mind blown because they didn't look like models, they looked like animals. This big hair and this animal makeup, it was intense.
There was some students that weren't allowed in that stormed the barricades and kicked over all these fire pots.
And then a fire started.
Because there were a pile of crashed cars, and I don't think we'd emptied the cars of petrol.
The car's actually on fire. There's a freaking car on fire on the catwalk.
And everyone thought it was part of the show.
And he's going, don't you dare go out there with fire extinguishers. To just keep sending them out, keep sending them out.
Had that not been rectified, that whole tent and all the top fashion editors and models would have been history.
That's just back to typical, wonderful, mad, brilliant Lee.
But the thing is my personal life and my working life were so close. And because of the shows, there's such a way to express what I'm feeling.
Did you move out of London? Did you settle in Paris now?
I stay both. I'm here for 6 months and London 6 months, all over. My dog is in London now, and I'm missing him. I'm missing my dog.
Traveling between the two cities to do Givenchy and McQueen, of course, it would take its toll. But he did it, and he managed to make the shows amazing.
By that time, there was so much more pressure because he was also doing his own line and then having to do ready-to-wear and couture. You could see the beginning of the pressure that Lee was under.
The favorite company of LVMH was Dior. Lee felt they were really comparing him with Galliano. And then he sort of found out that John had 4 times more budget than him to create his haute couture collection. The house we loved was the McQueen house. Givenchy was like a stepbrother. We knew that our time there had a expiry date. When we arrived at Paris, Lee's clothes tend to be very rigid. And I think in Paris, he got to discover the soft side of things. We took that and we brought it to London. For the number 13, I remember him very happy. Lee had it very clear on his head what he wanted to do. We all left the meeting thinking, oh my God, he has it very clear this season. He knows what colors, he knows the shape. Himself was feeling at peace, you know.
The first show I ever worked on with Lee, you know, he liked the idea of robots.
Lee kept going on about, oh, I'm gonna have this robot, this model, and we were like, oh no, the robots again, oh my God. We were just hoping he was gonna forget the idea. But then, the night before the show, the robot did turn up, and we didn't have a dress to go with the robots. I went back to the studio, and it's like, guys, we need to make a dress for the finale. We went under the table and pulled all this tulle out, and it was like, hey, there's the dress.
They told him it was impossible, and he said, no, it's not. You can do it. And that's what Lee did for people. He made them do the impossible.
They've got some technician down to operate the robots. And Lee was going, oh yeah, let's make the robots do more of this. And so Lee's directing these robots like they're actors. And consequently, you end up with this incredible choreography, her spinning.
You had Shalom Harlow there, and these 2 robots going around. And the thing is, the robots looked like they were a mind of their own.
think that's the first time that I was blown away by my own show. That man and machine thing at the end is, I'm still in shock really. That's the first time I cried at my show, so yeah.
Lee was living his dream. He would never have given the work up, as hard as it was, because you get that one chance in life.
First time I knew that Lee was actually getting very famous is when some stranger came up to us in the supermarket and asked for his autograph. And I remember him saying to me, "Oh my God, that's so scary." And I realized then that something was happening. He was breaking outside of fashion and becoming famous.
That whole celebrity thing and people chasing after him, because you got the feeling he was saying, this is not the important thing. This fame is nonsense. You know, what the important thing is what I do.
Sometimes wish he just had a normal life and that he could just be a normal person in terms of not having that pressure of everything at such a young age.
I knew Lee when he had nothing but a rubbish bin full of clothes, so I saw very quickly him become a millionaire and more. And the more money he had, he seemed to be more unhappy.
Because with the money came drugs, huh? And that was a sad thing.
It's okay. It made me look at things in a really clear light and an honest light when I was going through all this, to tell yourself, dude, this is too much work. There's something I had to give. That is a bad lot to take. No, I can't change myself anymore.
When did it become bad? Well, it became bad when the pressure became too much for him, and he obviously started dealing with it in ways he shouldn't have, unfortunately.
And with it came an aggressiveness, huh? A kind of anger and a sort of paranoia. But he's still in great clothes, but the personality changed, huh?
You know what I mean? And all the hard work I do 10 collections a year, and it's hard work. I didn't go to Givenchy, they come to me. So I got really upset when people started saying I was going to get fired, when it wasn't true. So, sod the lot of you, I do what I like.
There was definitely a change and definitely a move in our relationship. He had two sides to them.
He could come in a super cool mood, like full of laughter and that, or it could be a devil crossing the door.
He was obviously a very troubled person, and the darkness created this amazing creativity and genius artist. I had a tattoo, say McQueen on my arm. And I got covered up, and I think when he found out, that was kind of like the end of everything.
Lee was a romantic, and I think that he flirted always with the idea of love. I'm not sure whether he ever achieved it. The big thing in his life that he was in love with was his work.
And also, he didn't trust anyone. He thought, if the boyfriend is not here, it's because he's with someone else. And that made him suffer a lot.
People forget what fashion's always been about, and it's about attracting a mate, it's about sexuality, it's about showing a person who you are. I'm sorry if you think I'm stupid. Even I'm chubby and I would like to look smaller. I mean, let's be realistic here.
When I heard that life was such I was in the thick of the evil side of fashion you could ever be in. It's just a fucking mad period in my life.
And, you know, when he changed his appearance, he said, I changed myself. It was the wrong thing to do because I completely lost touch with who I was.
What was it, 10 years from Lee, little Lee McQueen, sat in the corner of my studio sewing away, to this svelte figure dressed in comme des garçons, you know, having to become something he didn't really want to be, this sort of persona, this Alexander McQueen.
The thing about us is the family. And that close-knit thing that has to be there. I mean, If anything, I'm becoming even more hard taskmaster. I'm watching the got the items, the teas, I've done everything in every department.
Six in the morning.
It's not. Don't do that to her.
She's only got a few hours left. It wasn't fun anymore for me. I think that was the bottom line. It just wasn't fun anymore.
Oh, maybe I smoked it. I don't like camouflage. I've never done better work than my time with Lee. It was times that were dark with him and times that were very bright. And we all chose it. We all chose to be there. And we all chose to not be there sometimes as well.
I collapsed once in Givenchy because of the pressure and the workload. I had a price to pay, and it was our health. I grew in the company. Of course, I wasn't the little boy that I started there. As I grew up, I realized that I was feeling like I was a little bit claustrophobic of the situation.
Sebastian!
No, it's back for the press.
Come on, you ugly bitch!
It was like full devotion to the McQueen house, looking after his dogs, endless hours of working, and weekends either working or socializing with Lee. We were going also on holiday together. I even know how to fake his signature, you know. I was feeling like trapped, even if I loved what I was doing. I tried to speak with him, and that didn't end up that well. The day I told him I was leaving, he told me, well, you better think about it because there is no way back. And I left, and it was really sad, you know, my leaving, you know, it was no one came to, after all the work I've done, and
Unfortunately, Lee took things quite to heart without maybe thinking about what the other person was going through or what they needed. And he would take it very personally when someone would leave or he felt betrayed.
I've been through the turmoil with business changes, people changing, you know, everything being tipped up in the air. You go through your life trying to understand yourself and why you're doing the things you're doing, why you're making the mistakes you're making.
A lot of people around fashion do suffer from anxiety, do suffer from panic attacks, depression. The industry is feeding this ego, and it has a very negative effect.
For the Voss show, the original concept was a padded cell.
You start losing who you are, and it becomes a darkness and a place that you can't get out of.
And of course, Lee being Lee, he wasn't happy with just this one really great idea. He then had to have another box in the middle is a kind of theatrical climax to the show.
When he came and sat down to explain what it was, he wouldn't look me in the eye, and he was saying, yes, it's about death and beauty and rebirth, and it's going to be beautiful. I really wasn't expecting me to be recreating Joel Peter Witkin's famous incubus image.
When I was collecting Wicked, I was going through some sinister times with sex and, you know, all this finding about yourself.
It's a pretty gruesome image, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, am I going to do this? And I was like, all right then, I will do it, but I want you to know, serious face, I'm doing it for art. And he looked at me like I was mad, and then he looked away and he went, I thought we all were, weren't we? And he was off. The actual set had that Stanley Kubrick 2001 meets an insane asylum feel, and the fact that there was the two-way mirror, so that when the fashion people, when the fashion press came in to wait for the show to start, they were all looking at themselves in the mirror. The music started ba-dum, 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 with this heartbeat that went faster and faster and faster.
Well, you didn't know quite what was going to expect, what was going to happen, and none of the audience knew at all.
Fashion is a big bubble, and sometimes I feel like popping it.
Then when the show starts, boom, you can see inside, but the models can't see the audience at all.
It was suddenly a much more kind of voyeuristic thing. The bandages that you put on the model's heads, so it had that slight feeling of unease and sickness and bedlam feel about it.
There was one time that I had just come out of surgery and he came to visit me. And he saw me and I had bandages everywhere and I was all bruised up and he was like fucking wicked as he would do that. He absorbed things like a sponge, saw the beauty and the ugly, as with the bandages on me.
Life isn't perfect, and we're not all perfect. We're not all size 0 models, and but there is beauty within the eye of the beholder.
For the final image to be this one of a large woman with moths everywhere. It sounds like a joke, really, but I do think there's a sense of humour going on underneath there as well. And it's fat birds and moths. I mean, isn't that just fashion's worst nightmare?
Every season, whose collections do I look at and whose collections am I jealous of, in a sense, and whose collections do I think are absolutely amazing?
Tom was literally God in the industry. I guess even if Lee was a rebel and he was a totally different kind of person, he probably was flattered and touched by the fact that someone like Tom Ford noticed him and wanted him. And also he was smart enough to know that he needed that financial help.
It's such an expensive thing to run this company. And McQueen's never been bankrupt, ever once. I wanted to be successful, I wanted to be self-sufficient. I can see McQueen light in the tunnel.
The wonderful thing about Lee is he is poet, and he won't like this either, but it's true, poet and commerce united, because he's very practical. So he understands that, you can express whatever you want on the runway, but you have to have something beautiful on the hanger to sell to a store.
Gucci Group was smart. They saw what the potential was, and they offered McQueen a deal he thought he couldn't refuse, which was, here, we'll underwrite your company and give you 50% of the ownership. They had secret meetings so that none of this would get back to Arnault and the LVMH people, and they had no idea it was coming until it hit them.
I was quite adamant when I talked to Tom that this was a one-man band.
So they leave you alone to design what you want?
100%. I was looking for major investment. And then Gucci got in touch, and the rest is history.
Au revoir, Givenchy.
Okay, good.
I have an infinity with the sea. I don't know, maybe because I'm Pisces. And when it rains and it snows and you near the sea and you can hear the waves. It's very melancholic, but it's very romantic. Sometimes you need to have a break to get away from everything and not to think about sort of like business and fashion shows, and to take time out.
I have to be surrounded by nature. This is older than the house. This is over 400 years old. It's an elm tree, and we uplight it at night. And it's good inspiration.
All my friends come here and, you know, we have the fire on and we watch DVDs and listen to music, and it's nice and relaxing.
He would be spending time with my mum a lot down the cottage.
But I'm grateful that we had that time together. We see more of each other. We did things together.
My family keep me grounded. Fashion can be a very superficial business.
When I started in London, there was nothing like this. It's as close as we can get to haute couture in England, you know. All the people here are students, and it's like training them up and giving them that initial step into the world of fashion.
Lee knew from when I was a little boy that I loved to draw, and I was always very artistic. A lot of time had passed, and I was working at a rubbish tip, and Lee had the position for a textile designer on menswear, and that's when he took me on. Lee was really happy having me there, firstly on the creative level, but secondly just having something that reminded him of his past and his childhood.
So, okay.
There was a period when it wasn't so good and I had a lot of angst, and it was kind of hard. There was a lot of confliction in my head with doing a job that I didn't particularly want to do, which was Givenchy. But I think I've come to a stage where I just accept this is my life, this is what I was born to do.
He controlled the vibe wherever he went. A lot of the time he was such a buzz to be around. The way I kind of put it is like he was the queen bee with the worker bees responding to the signals from that queen bee. And people felt that, you know, and he had this kind of childish way of sort of mucking about in the studio environment, and it just made things so light and such a nice place to be. There was always something creative happening. That's what excited everybody.
I speak so loudly in my work itself, you know. I think everything I do is personal. Even turning Kate Moss into a hologram is kind of personal. It's ethereal. It's a time I'm feeling at one with the world and heavenly. If you want to know me, just look at my work.
What does fashion mean to you?
My life.
Izzy died proud. She died having achieved beyond her wildest dreams.
The fact that Izzy went was a huge blow to so many people, including Alexander. A huge blow.
I saw him at Izzy's funeral, and I'd never seen anyone so devastated. Couldn't recognize him. He sat right behind me. But I turned around, this person in the Highland, a kilt and a hat and looking very... I thought, my God, it's McQueen, Alexander. And the look on his face was haunting. I felt for him. You could just see the pain he suffered. I could see the love. Huh? Never deny the love. It was such a love affair between those two.
Izzy seemed to slot in between a sister and a mum, and she was in the middle, and Lee just loved Izzy.
The connection between Izzy and McQueen, they both carried sadnesses. Alexander had been abused. He felt that person destroyed his innocence. Izzy had this very sad incident when she was a child, about 5 years old, and her brother she was playing with died. Not Izzy's fault, but she always felt responsible for him and carried that guilt. There was a destructive side and destructive issues which she could never resolve entirely, and they would blow up, which became more and more serious.
I don't take drugs, but I take medication. I mean, sometimes I have to take a pill just to keep me calm.
The pathway to her self-destruction was clear. Izzy perhaps was thinking she didn't want to go on forever. She couldn't reinvent herself as an old woman, because fashion is all about youth.
Discovering people is a big thing. It's like being a mother. And the milk's dried up.
Izzy was planning her death. So she wanted to say goodbye to McQueen. And she organised a weekend. She'd gone to a lot of trouble with a very lovely menu. And Alexander was exhausted and he turned up and just stayed in his room. Whatever she needed, he wasn't able to give it himself. But they did see each other. You know, there was a farewell between them. Big hug and kiss and see you in the next world.
The thing is, when you're ill, you don't know, you're very alone.
And Izzy had cancer at the end, ovarian cancer. It was terminal, who knows. Izzy certainly wouldn't have been interested in chemotherapy. The last thing Izzy said to me, do you remember, Deb, when I was a ray of sunshine? And I said, Izzy, you'll always be a ray of sunshine.
McQueen is calling his show La Dame Bleue. He's dedicating this show to his late great friend and mentor, Isabella Blow.
You could see her in the clothes, you could smell the perfume of her around, and you could see her children, in a way, in backstage, Alexander and Philip going crazy together.
What bonded them was Izzy.
Isabella single-handedly invented Alexander and myself from nowhere, with such conviction that we will never experience again. Her belief in you made you be the person you are.
Once you sat down and you saw the set and the music, and you were there, and it held you, because I kept seeing her in the clothes he was putting on the catwalk, and the hats, of course, that Philip was designing.
It was actually creating some mythical figure that was like Izzy's presence at the show.
So emotional, just couldn't stop crying. His bed, they were double. And grief is grief, you have to go through it.
And then to see them come on and realize how young they were, and they'd lost a great friend, and how they had loved her.
I think it had a big effect on Lee. After Izzy passed away, he was in a really dark place.
Not anger with myself, anger with the world. My mind won't go anywhere else. I try to stop it, but it won't. Everything can't revert to this darker.
We were watching TV in the evening, and Lee McQueen opened the news that day with the Horn of Plenty show. And my father was sitting there, and he's like, Sebastian, come over. I think it's your crazy friend's fashion on TV. And when my father saw the collection, and it's like, I think your friend is gone really mad. And I think with the Horn of Plenty, that really reflects the fashion world today. A pile of crap. 3 years of being apart, I think a lot, and I think he think a lot also. When I call him, it was like, hello, Lee. Hello? It's like, Lee, it's Sebastian. Where the fuck have you been all this time, you fucking bastard? We just started again like the brothers we were before. So then I took the ferry to Ibiza and I went to his villa. When he opened the door, I was in shock because the person who opened the door, he was a different person. He was really skinny and looking very fragile and very, very pale. When I hugged him, that's when I noticed something has changed because his body structure was just bones. There was hardly any muscle or flesh there.
Lee come in with the idea of having an invitation for a show that had that metamorphosis. He wanted his face to transform into the skull. Everything in his life had just led to these feelings of torment. Lee was HIV positive. Even though it isn't a death sentence as such, I think it was always in the back of Lee's mind. You'd feel the bad vibes when Lee was down, you know. There was a real depression that was brought with that as well.
I think the trouble is with Lee, after a show, when you've done that build-up and you've worked hard, and you could see there was a little bit of a down. And then on to the next show again. Yeah, it was just show after show. I don't know how Lee did it.
The pressure's kind of quite immense now because of the Gucci contract and you know, I do the men's now and now I also do McQueen. So it's about 14 collections a year again, same as when I was at Givenchy, so it's hard work.
I think he would like the idea of moving away and just leaving everything behind, but as it was his name above the door and his reputation as a person and everything he had built, he couldn't just abandon it.
If I ever get that old and I'm still around and I leave my company, I just burn the place down. Yeah. There's no one work there.
Really? So you'd never let someone carry on the McQueen tradition or the McQueen brand if you weren't actively involved?
I don't think so. I mean, it does. Because that person will have to come up with the concepts for my show, and my shows are so personal. How can that be?
I said, why don't you just step away, Lee, for a year? And he just said, you don't understand. He said, I'm responsible for 50 people, like they've got to pay their mortgage. I can't just stop.
I was always thinking, there's so much sadness in him, and that was sad, you know, because he was this successful, flamboyant being who actually was so lonely deep inside.
It can be really lonely, and I think you know, I think there's more to life than fashion, and I don't want to be stuck in that bubble of this is what I do, because it's nice because you see everyone in the office, they go home and they can shut off. But I'm still like that Alexander McQueen after I shut the door. Do you know what I mean? I've got to go home with myself. So, and, you know, if you've had a bad day, you've only got myself to answer to. So.
I mean, with us, it was like behaving all right, okay. But deep inside, we knew that he wasn't 100%. He could hear voices. He was telling me that they were chasing him. And one thing he used to say, paranoia will destroy us.
I remember doing a drawing, which is basically it's got lots of cameras around. And then we're thinking, well, maybe the cameras could be on robots. It was always about getting the camera right in your face, and it's surveillance, and it's making the audience a bit uncomfortable.
The idea behind Plato's Atlantis is where people come from the land and go back into the sea.
I'm looking for something that doesn't exist. That's the most amazing, beautiful place. I can't imagine anywhere that's in my mind, but really exists.
He loved swimming, scuba diving. He loved that feeling of just being in a different world underwater. You know, you're just away from everything. Almost like you're back in the womb, floating, you know, and that kind of serenity you'd get through that.
Plato's Atlantis was kind of like starting in his head with all the digital printing and all the experimenting, pattern cutting, and the robots were there again. He said to me, I designed my last collection, Sebastian. And he told me I had enough with all this. I'm gonna kill myself. And what do you mean? What do you mean you're gonna kill yourself? It's like, yeah, it's like, I am fed up, I had it with this, I just want to put this an end. And in my last show, in the end, he said, do you remember Voss? So I'm going to do the sort of same thing, but it's going to be a perspex box the size of a human being. So when the show ends, this box is going to come out from the ground with me inside, and then I'm just going to shoot myself. And I mean, I just didn't know how to react to that, you know what I mean? Because he sounded so convinced.
Yeah, but my life's always been a roller coaster, up and down. Yeah, stuff I want to get off.
It was like he thought that the whole fashion system was against him. And I said, no, no one is against you. But if you are thinking to do this, you're gonna harm so many people. Because people come to your shows to see your beauty, your talent, your creativity, and to see you, to see your work.
He was like a movie director. We had to be like aliens, and he told us this. He said, listen, you have to have this face strong, you know, you have to be powerful. With this show, he kind of threw a bomb on us. Okay, this is it, finish. Everything is finished, we are reborn, we're starting new chapter, new planets. I was really scared. I tried to not to picture myself falling. I wanted him to be proud of me, and I wanted him to be proud that he has such an army of models.
Endless print designs. It might have been a fish's fin, scales from a snake, and then manipulated and montaged into a repeat pattern and become something else, unrecognisable. This was the turn of the digital age coming into fashion.
If towards the end wasn't that happy, why are his best collections there? He knew he needed something revolutionary. And I think Plato's Atlantis it is, I'm sorry.
I didn't go to Plato. My mum not being well, she was on dialysis at the time. Lee didn't really want to face the fact that we was going to lose Mum because he'd lost Izzy. He wasn't dealing with Mum not being well.
After my grandmother Joyce had passed away, he was in a really bad shape.
Lee was distraught. We were sitting in the living room at my dad's, and he didn't look himself at all, Lee. I mean, we was all taking my mum's passing bad, but I think we was all worried about Lee because obviously Mum and Lee idolised my mum.
The last job he gave me to do was designing the gravestone. He liked the idea that I had the wings wrapping around the gravestone to kind of embrace my grandmother Joyce. Originally I had the hands which were facing down on top of the gravestone, but the hands for him facing down was holding them down. He wanted them uplifted, so he turned the hands upwards.
I called Lee and we spoke about Mum's funeral and that was the last conversation.
I seem sad at times about my work and my life. And it's sad, but I'm not bitter because I'm grateful for everything that's happened in my life. But I know when the time is to give it up.
The night I was in bed, I was reading, and I felt something touch my head. Very softly and very gently touch my head, and I said to myself, who's here? Who are you? You know, I knew someone had passed and was saying goodbye.
I got a call at 9:30 in the morning from my sister, and then that phone call just changed everything.
I just really couldn't believe what I was hearing because it just seemed so surreal in that moment. Just the vision in my mind of Lee being sort of all alone and doing that as well was playing through my mind, you know, and it's quite... it's not the nicest way to go, you know, suicide alone, hanging. It's... just don't want to think really what was going through his mind, how lonely he must have been as well, doing it.
The fashion world is in shock tonight over the news that Alexander McQueen has
Alexander
died.
McQueen, the darling of British fashion, has been found dead after apparently
Alexander McQueen,
committing
40 anni, è stato trovato
suicide.
morto, si dice impiccato nella propria
Вечная
lussuosa
память.
abitazione di
Торговая
Green
марка
Street.
Alexandra McQueen продолжит
Tras la
существование
repentina
даже
muerte
после
del diseñador de 40 años, Alexander
On a
McQueen.
appris ce soir la mort du styliste britannique Alexander McQueen. Ce grand nom de la haute couture était âgé de 40 ans. Ce
He used to say that a lot. One day, I'm gonna come home inside the body bag. And that day when the news opened again that day, him leaving his house inside a body bag.
I'd taken my kids to Hamley's 100th year celebration, and my partner picked me up and said, I can't do it. Just be really silly, I just cried. He said, Lee's dead. And it was just such a shock, and I was so angry for a really long time, because you think, just how did that happen? You know,
I think that perhaps after my mum went, that he felt there was nothing that could make him happy anymore. And I just think it was in that moment that he had that emptiness.
I miss him a lot, yeah. I miss that, you know, he could have had like some really great happiness in his life, and he didn't quite have that in his personal life, and that's what I wished for him most.
I'm so happy I got to meet him and to share part of my life with his story and everything. But I missed him. I wish things ended in a different way.
He just wanted to make really beautiful things, and he was sculpted in clothing. He was a sculptor, really, I think. And that's where that silhouette came from.
His clothes made me feel that you could be feminine, but at the same time, you know, don't fuck with me. I'm a bitch.
Things I remember best is seeing him working. It was magical. For me, it was like a magician.
One outfit would just be insane, and then the next one would just be genius.
Nobody could create emotions in a show like Lee McQueen did.
Fashion for Lee was a way of just communicating a whole world, and he wanted to take himself out of the picture and just for people just to focus on this art that he's creating.
Raucous, bolshy, incredibly funny, incredibly driven. Not only did he have a singular vision, but he was a very singular individual. And his strength of personality was quite phenomenal. You just don't see many people like that. They don't come up very often.